Well, good morning, everybody. I've taken as the theme for today the subject of Solomon's Temple and its relation to us as New Testament Christians. Now, Solomon's Temple, the sheer cost of it, the wealth that was ploughed into it, has always been an interesting subject for me, and I took this opportunity to look up the estimated modern worth of the temple. And according to the article that I read, it may or may not be accurate, the gold and the silver alone, just the gold and the silver, in today's market would fetch 216 billion 603,576,000 American dollars. So I'll just give you that figure again. That's 216 billion 603,576,000 American dollars. And as I say, that is just the silver and the gold. That doesn't include, for example, the cost of the jewels that were used in the construction of the temple, which of course we cannot accurately estimate. And another illustration of the sheer just opulence of the temple is found in 1 Kings chapter 5 and verse 17, where we read, "And the king commanded, and they brought great stones, costly stones, and hewed stones to lay the foundation of the house." So even the foundation of Solomon's temple was built using great and costly stones. That's just the foundation. I mean, normally nobody in their right mind would use anything other than the basest, simplest material to build the foundation of a house, because of course nobody sees it. So why would you bother? But this temple was to be so glorious that even the foundation was to be made of great and costly stones. Now, there's another very interesting little fact about Solomon's temple, and we read that in 1 Kings chapter 6 and verse 7, where it says, "And the temple, when it was being built, was built with stone finished at the quarry, so that no hammer or chisel or any iron tool was heard in the temple while it was being built." So the stones for the temple were all cut and shaped at the quarry, and when they arrived at the building site, they would simply be assembled, already shaped to fit. Now that's interesting. Why was it done that way? One answer that is put forward, which I found very interesting and which I wanted to share with you this morning, comes from the book of 1 Peter chapter 2 and verses 4 and 5, where we read, "Coming to him," that is Jesus, "as to a living stone, rejected indeed of men, but chosen by God and precious. You also, as living stones, are being built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ." And of course we know this analogy that God uses a number of times in the New Testament, where the church is described as a living temple, and we are described as living stones, and Jesus himself, of course, is described as the foundation stone or the cornerstone, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why the foundations of the temple were so expensive, so precious. And so we have this situation there where the stones were fashioned in the quarry, away from their final destination, which was of course to be in the glorious temple. And so it is that we as Christians are shaped and refined in the world, away from our glorious final destination in heaven. And I think that's a very interesting and a very thought-provoking comparison. And it should give us a different perspective to suffering and difficulties than we might otherwise have. Of course, there will be no chastening in heaven. There'll be no difficulties, no trials in heaven. It's a place where, of course, that no longer exists. There is no suffering in heaven. That's all over. And so we will arrive perfected, already perfected, ready to take our place in the building, as it were, that God has prepared for us. So if rough edges need smoothing and corners need to be knocked off, then it must be done here. It must be done in the world, away from, as it were, the building site, away from the final destination, away from heaven. And it's a simple point, but hopefully this will give us a better understanding and a better acceptance of some of the difficulties that we face. I know, for example, that some people are very concerned and very unhappy about the fact that we're not going to be meeting at Braunston, and probably not for some while. Well, these things happen. This thing did not take God by surprise. It certainly took us by surprise, but it certainly didn't take him by surprise. He knew it was coming. He knew what the consequences would be. All of the difficulties and the hardships that we face in life are all carefully measured by God, foreknown by God, filtered, as it were, by God, and used of him. And we have to understand that, as hard as it may be at times, and I know it's a very easy thing to say and it's a much harder thing to do, but we have to accept that the difficulties, the trials, the hardships that we go through, one of the reasons for them is to fit us for heaven. It is to take away those rough edges, those sharp corners, those things which make us poor witnesses, so that we may be shaped and fashioned and fitted together into the glorious building of God's church, as a witness to the world, and as even a glorious witness in heaven. So I hope that was interesting. It certainly made me think, and God bless us as we continue with our service this morning.